So with that, I am going to introduce Brett Littlehale, who is going to start us off by talking about registration. And Brett is one of our counselors and also one of our football coaches. Yes, because we're recording that, so yeah, and then you can just
Good afternoon, thank you for coming. I'll talk briefly about our registration process, which is actually kind of underway already for our freshmen and our juniors and our sophomores. By show of hands really quick, how many freshman parents are there in the room? Okay. Any sophomores or juniors? Any transfer parents? Okay, so all freshmen, good. So the way our things work, I'll talk about two things. The Academic Planning Guide, which is an online resource. It used to be paper. It's a pretty big document though, so it's all online now. And I'll show you where that's located. It was actually just published, I believe, yesterday on our website. And then I'll also go over the timeline of when information will get out to students and in what forms that will happen. First things first, the online Academic Planning Guide. It's going to contain a lot of information. The biggest thing for students, what they care most about, is kind of the class descriptions. What does each class have? What does it entail? But for parents, there's also a lot of policies and different things that are going to be informative for you. First off, graduation requirements. Obviously, we're in high school to graduate. There's certain things that we need, and I'll get to a slide that has just those requirements on there. They're laid out nice and easily for the students on the webpage. Also, NCAA information. If the student's looking to participate in Division I or Division II athletics, there's a portion there that spells out kind of what they need to do, what classes go towards that. Also, department course sequences. Depending on what a student starts in high school, each year they'll build off of that. For instance, biology is our freshman science. You have two options from there. It's physical science or chemistry. And then from there it builds to, if you go to physical science, it'll then go to chem, or if you go to chemistry as a sophomore, it goes to physics. So in there, I'll give you all the descriptions. Math's an easy one, 1, 2, 3. Then it goes to pre-calc after that. Course descriptions I mentioned, that's something the students will value most out of that. It's the bulk of the book. And also various policies. Drop policies is a big one on there, pass-fail policies, auditing policies of different classes. So there's a lot of information towards the beginning of the book on that. On this slide here, on the actual course description page, on our website, it's linked to kind of a timeline. I'll go through a little bit on the next slide. It'll give you information on what days certain things are happening. For instance, right now, let's go back a month and a half. So all freshmen were given a Discover You presentation where they went in, we brought them down to the College and Career Center, got them familiar with that. They took a career interest profiler to kind of get them thinking, okay, down the road, what are some different ideas that are out there? The reason we do that at that point in time is hopefully allow students to start thinking, why am I taking these classes I'm taking? Why did I choose the electives I want to be in besides my older brother or my friends saying, hey, take this class, it should be fun. So we tried to get them to think kind of globally, have those conversations at home, think about what classes they may benefit from, and think about how, over a 4-year plan, they could fit some of those classes in. We went over graduation requirements. The next slide will have that for you guys, and I'll show you some of the differences. Sometimes you're surprised over some of the graduation requirements, especially when it comes to world language. There's always a misconception there. Right now, there's teacher conversations that should be taking place in all classes. So teachers, the way it works here, teachers will talk with students how they're doing in a certain class. Do they feel maybe honors or an AP class is in their best interest? Or if they're struggling in honors class, is the honors class the good fit for them? So they'll have those conversations, and what teachers do is they'll input all of that into the system. That information becomes live for parents on January 7th. What's nice about the core classes, everything when it comes time to registration with us, all that stuff is in the system already. Also, the elective classes are in the system. As counselors, we will meet with students during registration, but one issue that we have is we cannot change the levels. I know there's a misconception. I'll just tell my counselor to put me in the next level class, the honors class of history, AP US history. We're not able to change those, so those conversations over the next, some of them started last week and will go on the next couple weeks, those conversations are important to have with those teachers. So if there's questions about levels, you want to reach out to those teachers or talk with your student to talk to those teachers specifically before we go to winter break. Advisement day. Kind of actually had the question asked me today, kind of what is this day? We go in and we meet with every single freshman, sophomore, and junior English class. So we hit probably about 1,800 students or so, 1,700 students on that day. We'll go over kind of what the registration process looks like, what information students need, for instance, if there's new courses coming out. This will be the first time a student will register without a parent or a sibling with them. So we kind of talk about what that process looks like. We bring down all freshmen on PE. They'll meet with us. It's pretty brief once we do the registration process. But the sheet that I passed out, that on the top of it has kind of a grid-looking thing. So that's the sheet that should be coming home at some point in time. I'll say this for freshmen, they're the best prepared of the three that we meet with in the school. I don't know if it's a fear factor, or they think if the signature's not there, we can't register, but whatever happens, I love it. As they get older, unfortunately, less signatures come back and less prepared the students are. So freshmen do a really nice job. And as students look at that sheet, and we'll go through them all with them, obviously the English will continue, you read 4 years of English. Math is the next level. Science, which I mentioned before. U.S. history, all sophomores will be in U.S. history is at social studies. That's either regular U.S. or AP U.S. The PE health driver's ed. If students take driver's ed outside of school, that's health and PE will fill that line. Depending on their birthday, which is always a lottery, depending on their birthday, if their birthday, we change year to year where the date starts. So it's usually December 1st. So if a freshman's birthday is before December 1st, they usually get first semester driver's ed. If their birthday is after December 1st but before April 1st, they go into driver's ed second semester. Those dates never stay the same. They'll always push them back to make sure you fill those classes up. So I tell students, just because you're born later in December, let's just wait, be patient. Those are the three there, so everybody will take PE too, and then health is the other one. That'll fill that also. If a student, one question we have with some students is if we take driver's ed during the day and PE2 during the day, when do we take health? Actually, I take that back. You'll take health with driver's ed. PE2 gets kicked down the road. So PE2 is a mixture of juniors as well as sophomores. So let's see, flip that sheet over where it has all the classes. What's nice about kind of sophomore year and then even more junior year, more classes become available for students. If you remember the sheet that went home last year that your students were able to look at was pretty limited in terms of electives. That sheet has quite a bit. In coming senior year, social studies isn't U.S. history. There's probably 12, maybe 15 different social studies classes to take, as well as some more sciences get come online as well, and some different English electives. So there's a lot of options students have. One thing we like to tie it back to is that career interest profiler. Why are you taking the electives that you're taking? How is that going to benefit you in your time here? And also, how do you maximize your time the best? Going into that is the graduation requirements. The one on the left, the column on the left, is kind of our requirements here, what every student has to have to graduate. We have plenty of time during the day. I tell students who are worried sometimes, is there enough time in the day to get my requirements in? You can have a study hall every semester and get to 24 credits. You only need 22 to graduate. So they can exhale a little bit with that. Some students prefer to take more classes, which is their choice. On the left, though, is our requirements. Obviously, 4 of English, 3 of math and social studies. The surprising one for a lot of students is the 2 of science. That's the basic, what you need to get out of here. And we'll get to that in a second. CTE, which is going to be that career and technical education, is going to be just 1 class. Same with fine arts, you have to take at least 1 class of those. PE health driver's ed, every semester you're here. Consumer ed, I have that starred. There's 3 different ways in the building to fulfill the consumer ed requirement. One is a class called consumer ed. It also counts as a CTE requirement, so kind of double dips there. There's another class called personal economics. So consumer ed, by the way, is available to sophomores. I do get quite a few sophomores will take it to say, oh, let's get this requirement out of the way. There's a personal econ class, which is a social studies class. So it double dips as a junior-senior social studies elective plus the consumer ed requirement. And then the third way is a consumer math class, which is a senior mathematics class, full year class, but it fulfills that requirement. The electives, the reason it starts is that number can change depending on what you do with consumer ed. It'll double dip some other spots. On the bottom, the one for freshmen, that's the shocker, is world language. It's not required to graduate. Some students are like, oh, I thought we did, and other students are like, whew, I didn't want to take one, or I don't know about this. They're in their first year, they're like, I don't know. If we go to the college column, 4 years of English, obviously that's the standard. And we're talking about 4-year schools in generalities here. They want to see at least 3 of math, at least 3 of science, and 3 of social studies, if not more, depending on your schools. The higher selectivity you get to, those 3s become forced. And then on the bottom, the world language, most 4-year schools are hoping to see 2 years. Depending on the school, they have different benefits. You may never have to take language again, which some of those students, myself included at the time, and like that one, once I got to 2, I didn't have to take it in college. But again, as you get more selective with schools, they may be looking at different numbers with that. We highlight the language piece with students because that's always a misconception. I thought I needed this, I thought I needed this. If they haven't started it yet, that's okay. They can start it as a sophomore or a junior if they do want to get those 2 years in, so they have a little bit of time. Any questions in terms of the registration process and information? And again, that website is a good resource. It'll lay kind of out day by day. That here and here.
So language is not considered an elective?
Yeah, so the language, it's a separate category. The elective is just credit. It could be, I have some students who are graduating this year with 7 science credits, or 5 English credits. So they take additional, you could take them in any category. Just the elective is just thinking in general credit. So if you do take German, it would count towards that 4.5.
Oh, would, okay, that's my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the number. The electives are there just to get you to 22. It doesn't matter how you get there. As long as you hit those other requirements, 22 is the magic number. Yes?
I want to jump back to these teacher conversations.
Yeah.
That's between the student and the teacher? Who initiates that?
It's a teacher. Yeah, you're a teacher. Sometimes it's general with the class. For instance, everybody in the class is doing well. Teacher might say, hey, if there's a different level you might want to take, come and approach me on it. We welcome those conversations because they've now been with the teachers for almost a semester. They have 14 days left, which is scary. And they have those conversations with students and then input the information. And then there was one more question.
Mine was just about driver's ed.
Okay.
Does the school offer it in the summer, as a summer class?
It's a summer class, yeah.
They do, so if you're bringing in plans in the summer, there might be an option for the summer class?
So it's going to be dependent on availability, which is limited in the summer. Usually it's going to be older students will be able to enroll with that, not the younger students getting ahead.
Okay.
Another conversation I had with students, a student today, in order to take driver's ed, you have to have passed at least 8 classes your previous 2 semesters. Usually that's not an issue. Sometimes it is. So that's just one thing to keep in mind too. If your student's not doing what they need to do, you can kind of hold that over their head. You need to pass these classes to even sit in a class. Yeah.
Can they still do a PE leader if they're doing driver's ed?
So that one gets sticky. You can, but you have to give up an elective course in order to get the health in. Because you could do health and driver's ed, PE leader would take an elective spot. Be sophomore, junior. Yes?
So the actual registration process, I lost that.
It's going to
An
be,
advisement day is just speaking, right?
we're getting in front of all
Okay.
the students.
You made some mention of like.
So
they're
on the
registering on
form,
their own for the first time. And
Yeah.
I lost the whole like,
It
where
was
do
like, whoa.
we actually register?
yeah, so we will register out of PE classes for freshmen. And on this sheet, so this sheet should come home to you guys. It's also going to be on that website that I posted. It'll have the dates for freshman registration on there. We'll register all freshmen. Usually it's over a 3 or 4 day period. These are, by the way, these are last year's sheets. Those don't come out until we meet with department chairs for new classes and what's available to what level. So this is just an example from last year's for you. And they will be a different color. So when they come home, it doesn't blend in with the map. Yeah.
Then will they meet with their counselor before registration day, or is this something they're doing with their parents? I mean, is the recommendations from where? Is it coming from their counselor, or?
So the recommendations for all core classes will be core teacher driven.
Okay.
And that's the one I mentioned, the
And it's
level.
gonna be posted online?
Yeah, on the 7th.
Okay.
Is when those, on through Home Access Center, those requests will be, or recommendations will be live.
So there won't be a one-on-one meeting with
So the one-on-one meeting, it's kind of a split process. The one-on-one meeting will be at the end, where we sit down. It's really quick though. If you remember that freshman,
Yeah.
this Saturday, it was like rapid fire, right? So these are rapid fire as well. One thing, part of the reason they're rapid fire is all the core classes are locked in. There are, I probably should mention too, overrides is a process we use. So say your student is in U.S. history, or global right now, everybody's in global, but you wanted to take AP U.S. history, and the teacher says, I don't know if that's a good idea. Each department will have a process that the student would go through in order to override that. So if the overrides, and they're all different timelines, which sometimes can get confusing, but once the overrides are in, those will go into the system, we'll change it, and then we meet with the student. If they're in by that time, those will be up to date. If not, we do it on the back end. In that individual meeting, though, is when we'll talk core classes. You've got 2 other elective spots here. What are some of the classes we're looking at? We saw that you were in Spanish 1. We're going to continue that. That'll be in the system as well. Teachers will upload recs even in elective areas. And then we sometimes go and eliminate some of those because I've had it up to 13 periods during the day, depending on all the requests that are in there. So we got to get some out sometimes. But it's a quick conversation. A lot of the prep really is teacher and student driven up front. And then through advisement day, hopefully having those conversations. One thing I would encourage you to ask them is, why are you taking a certain class? And if the reason is my friend said, or so-and-so said, this will be fun, dive a little bit deeper. Make sure it's long-term, something that's good for them. Yep.
So if their conversation, let's say they're in Math 1, and they want to end in calculus, they would need to take Math 2 this summer. And if there's conversations to do that, but the department head won't approve that until after so we have, like, how do we do that? Because you got to get a department head to approve the summer school, right?
So any type of jumping ahead, and this goes to the same if there's, let's say there's a failure. Similar things. We will, when we register students, we will register them for the next level. And then coming out of summer school, we get all those grades, and then we make the changes into the proper class. We will never jump ahead assuming summer school. Summer school is only 11 days each semester. You're only allowed to miss, I want to say it's 2, and even 2 out of 11 is a lot. And we never want to, 11 days a semester. So we never want to guess that that's going to happen. Something, accidents, illnesses. So then once that grade's in, then we'll go and change to math.
So they don't need the department head's approval for summer school until later in the next semester.
Yeah, you wouldn't get that yet. Yeah. Yes?
For driver's ed, if you end up doing that privately, do they just do a semester of health and then a semester of PE?
Yeah, PE2. And then we chase down even seniors late in the ball game. All they need to do is bring in their driver's license or a copy saying they passed the classroom portion with whatever driver's agency, and then it takes care of it on their transcript. Any other questions before? Yeah.
So it's the same number of electives as this year, so if you're doing music and foreign language, you still get electives.
Yeah, there's only 8 periods, When the flexibility comes in is depending how you work social studies or science, or math, really. But with social studies, I'll have some students that'll take social studies freshman, sophomore year, take a year off junior year, knowing they're going to have to come back to it. You can't do that with math. You're not going to take a year off. So that's why it's a little less fluid. But with those two, only 8 periods. Yeah. Later on, junior, senior, there's a 0 RPE option. If you want to wake up at 7, or get here at 7. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. Number 2.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Kelly Zoner, Associate Principal for Staff and Students. Before we bring Lisa up to go over the supports, I wanted to just kind of go over the structure of final exams, because this is going to be the first for our students. So here's what our final exam structure looks like. So on the first day of final exams, on Wednesday, you're going to notice, first of all, it's an hour and a half for the final. and the student is expected to stay in that final the entire period. You'll see it's period 1, period 2, and period 4. So what the student should be doing is kind of planning out their preparation, right? And then on Thursday, it's period 7, 8, and 6. Friday, period 3 and 5. Now, on the first 2 days of final exams, buses run right after that third exam. So our buses will take off approximately at 1:10 when we have all the students boarded on the bus. But on Friday, notice that we have exam 3 and 5, and the bus leaves after period 5. So they're going to be coming home around 11:30. Right. The makeup period, which is deceiving for many students when they see, oh, makeup, I can just not go to my final on Wednesday and instead I'll go over to that makeup. No, those makeups are for students who have pre-approval and there was some kind of illness, some kind of reason why they could not make their scheduled final. But the expectation is they are at their scheduled final. Does that make sense? So the big key here, which is brand new for our kids, right? It's open campus. So let's kind of just discuss what that looks like for our kids. So open campus during final exams would mean that our student would be expected to attend the finals, the ones that they have. But for instance, my son has period 4 lunch. So there is no final for lunch, right? So after 11:15 on Wednesday, he is free to leave. So that's new for freshmen. Where is he going? Well, hopefully somebody can drive him home because there isn't buses available, after every exam period. So kind of anticipate that they're going to be asking to go home when they're able to. If they cannot go home or you don't want them to, they're absolutely allowed to stay in the cafeteria. So the cafeteria kind of becomes a study area for all of our students, and it's supervised. We will have small snacks, little breakfast items in the morning, and there's some small snacks right at the end, but we are not serving a full lunch. So that's something else for the kids to anticipate if they want to have some snacks or something to drink. Again, big key here is because it's open campus and we are in the middle of finals, there's no movement in the hallways. So the kids are not accessing their lockers, hanging out, having conversations. We kind of lock it down, keep it secure, to keep the area quiet. So the only place they really can be is the cafeteria. So let's just say my junior doesn't have a period 7. He might be arriving at 9:45. Okay? So he's going to arrive maybe after he has some Dunkin' Donuts breakfast, and he's going to head into Downers North. Now, what he'll need to show is his school ID. Because while we'd like to say that we know all of our students, our security will be looking for IDs to make sure that we're keeping this building safe at the same time. So he would need to show his ID. They'll escort him to the cafeteria until that passing period. So while it is open campus and the kids can move in and out, we want to make sure that the building's still secure. So it is on a semi-lockdown where they stay in the cafeteria. Any questions about what that exam schedule looks like? My freshman asked me today, I asked him before I came here, I said, tell me something you don't know about the final exams. He's like, I got it. I said, oh, okay, great. How do you have it? What does that mean to you? He's like, well, I take my exam and I leave. I said, no, Connor, no. You take that exam and you stay in that period until you are released at, say, 9:30. So he thought open campus meant I come in, take my exam, and I walk out like I'm in college. No, you still have to stay here till 9:30. Okay, so you might finish that test early, which is a good thing to kind of reiterate for your student. You're there the entire time. Take your time. You might rush the exam, you might go through the test, and you're like, wow, I have an hour and a half, and I've got it done in an hour. Go back, you've got time. You're not doing anything else at the moment. Some teachers might say, if you turn in your exam, I'll let you have a book. Let them have a book, have them studying for other exams. That's up to the teacher discretion, based on what the exam looks like. But tell them, remind them, go back over that exam, because you have some time. Okay? And again, the last thing that I want to talk about before Lisa comes up and kind of shows you some more support for the students as they prepare for their finals is 2 very important dates that we have. So the first one will come up on Tuesday, December 11th. And that's gonna happen right after school. It's from 3:30 to 4:30 in the student cafeteria. It's hosted by a number of our student groups, North Stars being the dominant one that kind of structures it all. And it's open to all freshmen. So all freshmen welcome to what they call Exam Jam. So in the cafeteria, all of our upperclassmen involved in the senior class, I Will, and North Stars will be there tutoring and preparing the freshmen. So it's student tutors. It's monitored, it's supervised, snacks available, and they all sit in there and it's like a giant think tank of kids preparing for their final exams. The key here is if our students have never had an experience, there is a late bus that will leave at 4:45. So I have 2 security officers who help manage those 2 buses, because there's 2 buses that come here. And at 4:30, they'll release the kids to go on to the after-school activity bus. They need their ID to get on the bus. One bus goes east, the other bus goes west. We do it based off their address, and they get dropped off right at home. Now, because this is extremely popular, expect if your student's taking the bus, it's going to take a little while, because they're dropping off a lot of kids. So they might ask you to pick them up instead. Okay? But that happens on Tuesday, December 11th. So that's really nice because it really is our upperclassmen working with the younger ones. The other thing is on our late start day for the semester exam review on Monday, December 17th, which would be a late start, we're going to run the buses twice. One at the regular early morning start time, Tuesday through Friday, and one again at that late start time. Why? Because all of our teachers are available for help. So they're in their classrooms for over an hour and a half where you can have the students come in for some last minute prepping for the final. So if the student wants to wake up early, they're more than welcome to come in for that exam review. My junior highly recommends it. He says it's very valuable. You can go to multiple teachers, you move around, get some help from your math teacher, head on over to your Spanish teacher, and all that time, the teachers are there on hand. It's absolutely wonderful. But then if they don't, because they want to sleep in, that's okay too. There's a second run, and that'll be the late start run. So the buses run twice that day. And they're all in their classrooms, so the teachers will start advertising that. Any questions about those 2 things? Yes?
And that's for all class levels?
Yes.
or less?
So the semester exam review is for all, and I would actually say for the exam jam, there's so many students in there, even though they advertise it for the freshmen, I would say it's open to all. There's somebody there that's going to help.
And
Yes.
the exam jam, is it structured by like, I mean, your freshman just shows up and there's a biology section, there's a math section?
Exactly. So they all show up into the student cafeteria, and our teachers, our counselors are dividing them up and basically saying, here's biology's going to meet over here. Everyone come on over here. Math 1, we're going to move over here. And they basically break it up based on the needs of the kids in front of them.
So your child then kind of picks the one they think they're gonna need the most help in, or can you move?
They can move
between-
around.
Oh, they can.
It's
move
fluid.
between them too?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely looks like a giant. It looks really fun. I mean, the kids are moving around. They're having snacks. They're conversing with their upperclassmen. The upperclassmen are helping them out. It's quite a sight to see, actually, the kids all working together. But yeah, it's fluid. They can move.
One other question on your previous slide, with the open campus, can they only exit out on Main Street, or are there certain entrances and exits that are, I mean, once they get in the morning, they have to use Main Street for drop off and pick up if they're done early?
It's Main Street or Prince. Okay, but remember, if you're picking them up, if they're asking you to pick them up, leaving the building, they can leave on Forest. That's the safer spot.
Okay.
I would recommend that. So if you're picking them up, I would say Forest, because I don't want them running across Main Street. Prince is difficult because you can't just park on the street. You'd have to go into the lot, but we would help direct you there. But if you're picking them up, Forest. If they're heading out to Starbucks, they're going to go out Prince. So that's okay. Great questions. Any other?
And then how quickly do they find out their grades from their exams? Like, is it posted with, like, over before break or when they get back, or how, I don't know.
That will all depend. That will all depend with the teacher and kind of the exams that they're giving and the course load that you're working on. Some, sometimes they know right away in some courses and sometimes they don't.
Grades are due like the week after we get back, so most of them will probably not be out until early January.
Lisa? Sure.
Is there a final exam for German?
Yes, PE has a final. Yes, the only one they don't have is for lunch or study hall.
Yeah, really good questions. Hi, so yeah, I'm Megan as well. I have a freshman here at North also, so I know I have a lot of familiar faces in the audience, so I'll spare you a lengthy introduction. I am a Downers Grove resident and parent. I specialize in executive function skills, so if you are not familiar with what that means, I won't go into the long version. How students really get things done, organization, planning, time management, processing of information, how they really retain, learn, and understand it. Their study skills, of course, and then the most important one for me is the self-regulation, because at the end of the day, we can teach them all the skills, but if they're procrastinating or avoiding or not doing it, that's an entirely different issue. So, I've been doing this probably for almost 15 years now. I do get to live it at home as well. We do have 3 kids, a couple of them with some additional challenges, so I work at it at work, and I come home, and I work it at home. Lots of fun for me. But tonight I'm going to be very specific. I know those of you who have heard me speak before know that I like to talk. I'm trying to deliberately speak slowly this evening, since I have a tendency to not do that. I'm going to stay very focused on what it takes to finish strong for the end of the semester, which really starts now, in my opinion. We start prepping our kids for end of semester in November. And I know a lot of people are thinking, well, final exams aren't really until December 21st, so they just have to study for a week or two before. Mostly it's the kids who are thinking that. So you and I know better. It takes a lot more than that to really fully be prepared, not just for the exam portion of it, but to actually finish in a place where they want to be finishing. Because with the holidays coming, or having come, and we're in the midst of that, it's really difficult for students to stay focused. After they settle into the year and they start with some good habits, things have a tendency to slip, usually around Halloween time. There's some distractions, they've been in the thick of it for a little while, and that's when we see things unraveling. So this is a great time to kind of reassess and refocus before it's too late, and we're sitting there a week before exams going, well, I didn't realize my grade was that low, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do about that. Now's the time we really want them to start to pay attention. So I have a course that I have done both in my office, kind of in a workshop style, and then of course we do this with all of our individual coaching students, and it's just called Finish Strong, and it's geared towards kind of a step-by-step process as to how to help students really learn to understand how to navigate this end of the semester so that they can feel good about how they performed and if they met the expectations that either you as parents have set or that they have set for themselves. So we want them feeling confident and successful throughout this process and not having that last-minute panic and disappointment when things don't turn out the way that they had planned. So step 1 in the process, and I'm just going to kind of roll through these. I'll show some visual examples up in a little while, which as many of you know, you won't be able to see them all from where you're sitting, but I'll kind of walk you through what they're all about. And when you get the slide presentation emailed, you should be able to zoom in and see a lot more of what those include. The first step is really grade analysis. So if you have heard me speak at all recently in the area, I have talked about this, I think, every single time, because it's a really critical piece for students to not just check their grades on their own, but to truly analyze what's happening. So the questions that we want to ask them and we want them asking themselves are, what do I feel I'm really capable of doing in this class? So now they've been in school for a while. We all have freshmen, it sounds like. So they kind of got a feel for it. They know what their strengths are. They know where their challenges are. What are they really, truly capable of? And then where do I stand with that? So we want to look at the grade as a number. And when we talk about grades, I always say this, it's not all about the grades. It's using the grades as a benchmark to indicate whether or not they're reaching their potential or performing where they want to be performing. It's kind of what they desire and they articulate. And more often than not, it's the students who are articulating, at least in my office with me, that they want good grades. And I know that they don't always express that at home with you guys as parents or with me, but at the end of the day, they really do want to do well and feel good about it. So looking at where they're standing, we want to use those grades to indicate kind of how things have been going. Why are those grades what they are? So this is the piece where the analysis comes in. So we want them really reflecting and then using this grade analysis to figure out not only where they need to make adjustments or they might need help, but what can they do about it? And that's the big thing for me when I kind of started this business way back in the day. As a parent, I realized I could do all the research in the world and find out all of these wonderful resources and all this great information, but at the end of the day, I needed someone to help me figure out what to actually do. And it's no different for our students. They need to know what to do next, but they don't all have that skill or that ability. So that's why I've created some of these structures and why we want to coach and guide them through figuring it out. So the grade analysis, and I'll kind of just point in general to what this is. There's a blank template for it. I like to throw student examples up, so they're not always pretty. We want them looking at the top at what they want to get in each class, lay out the classes, look at where they're actually at, find that's wonderful, that's easy to do, they can pull up home access. It's, often we can get them to check it and look at it, and then they'll kind of go, oh, darn, I got a D on that. Okay, bummer. Close the phone or the Chromebook, and they move on. I don't want them to stop there. I want them to do a few other things. So the first thing is just every single score I want them to analyze and look at. Because a lot of times what happens is when they stop and start to really look at the details from the breakdown of each class, they'll come up with things that they didn't know were happening. Well, I didn't know that. I did that assignment. Why is it a 0? I turned it in. What's going on? If they're not looking at the detailed list of grades, they might not have caught that, and they won't really understand why their grade is what it is. The second section is to look at the category averages. So I want them really digging in, and in home access, I talked about this last time, and many of you may have seen it, but most kids who come into math are not aware this is an option. In the upper right-hand corner, when you're on the grades page, you can hit full view, and that will give you at the bottom of each class a summary of their category percentage. So that'll give you, their exams are, they're weighted at 20% or 60% of the class grade, and they're getting an 85% average. Great. Their participation score, 30% average. Oh, hey, that's what we need to work on. Okay, so you can see what those categories are, and I want them to make note not only of what the weights are, because kids are like, well, I do my homework, I don't understand why I don't have an A in this class. Well, that's because your homework is weighted at like 5% of your grade, and you're bombing all your tests because you're not studying, and that's why your grade is a C or a D. So it's very enlightening, very eye-opening. It's kind of one of those light bulb tools when we work with kids through this, or I ask them to work through it themselves and I guide them through it. They have those aha moments left and right. That really drives them and propels them to realize why they need to take action. They just might need a little help at the next step, which is step 3. What is my plan for improving it? Once they have completed steps 1 and 2, most students can come up with a couple of solutions on their own. Oh, I see, my exam grades are a D. Maybe I should study. Yeah, think so? Maybe you should, yes. And then it comes down to figuring out how to study, which is a whole other issue, which we'll talk about in a minute. But this is very enlightening. It's a really great concrete visual tool I talk a lot about. We want students to have something visual, something concrete, and we need it to be specific. And we can't say most of these things or work through these things enough. All right, so the second step is grade calculations or predictions. We do this with all of our students, and it's really just taking a look at where their grade is at in the class, where they want it to be, and then calculating what it would take on the final exam to keep or get that grade, right? A lot of you guys as parents do this. I know a lot of parents will I have had parents put together spreadsheets. That's what I do. I use Google Sheets. I type the formula in because I don't want to have to punch it in the calculator every time. And it helps to motivate students, right? We don't want them obsessing over the grades. We don't want them blowing off studying for one test just because they feel like, oh, I only have to get a 60% in there. Forget that. I'm not going to study for that class. What we want to do is point out to them that this is just to help them prioritize, to help them see, which classes are they going to have to get a little bit higher of a score. You might spend a little more time studying for that class. But it really, at the end of the day, is about them learning the content. Most of this stuff is going to show up again in the second semester. The classes will build. So we don't want them to use this as a reason to kind of blow off any tests they're studying, but we really want them to see, though, how to prioritize their time. And then I also want them to look at where they might need the most help, right? So if they have a test that they have to get an 85% or a 90% on to get the grade they would like in a certain class, maybe that's the one where you need to go and visit with the teacher a little earlier or a little more often and figure out what it's going to take. The other thing is when you put this calculator together, I just threw an example up here. I type the formula into the cell about what is the exam grade I need, and then we put their current semester grade here because Downers North is on semesters basis, so you just need to figure out what they need, what their current grade in the class is. Most classes, I feel like, are weighted at 80% course work or your semester work, and 20% is the exam. But a lot of teachers here, I know kind of that varies, and it can range usually from 5 to 20% being weighted on the exam, and then anywhere from 80 to 95% in the actual semester coursework. So What's great about this tool though is that the kids take ownership of it, right? It's visual, it's specific. This is so motivating, and I start this with them in early November because it's very eye-opening when they realize, you could look at this. I mean, math, we've got an 84 going, not a bad grade. So kids look at that, they're like, oh, I'm doing okay, I'll probably pull off an A, yeah. And we're like, okay, well now we're getting to the end of the semester, we've only got one test left. It's gonna take a lot to boost that up, and if you want that A, it's not looking good for you because you gotta get 115%. So they can play with it. It's probably not possible. I know some teachers have extra credit, but not that much. They can play with it though. And so what they do when they have that control and they go in like, well, what if I needed 80? And they type in an 80 and they're like, well then I would need a 70 on my exam or an 80 on my exam. And they can see kind of what they need to do, but also it motivates them because they're like, wait a minute, what if I had an 88 in this class? What would it take? So it encourages them to do everything they can, and this is that finishing strong with your classwork and your studies. This isn't just the exam grade we're talking about, it's motivating them to kind of step up their actions and their efforts right now in the coursework. So that's why I like to do this. Again, I hate to focus too much on grades, so my first two ones were on the grades because they are a good indicator, and for kids, they're a good motivator. I hesitate because I know sometimes we as parents can get sucked into focusing on that a little too much, and I've talked about that in other talks. We want to stay away from it, but it is important to use that as a measure or a benchmark. Okay, using your teachers, I'm going to go through this one relatively quickly. A lot of my high school students with whom I work, I work with kids of all ages, junior high, primarily through high school, into college, right? So I will have kids coming to me as juniors and seniors, and it's still somewhat surprises me, and it shouldn't, almost 15 years into this, how many students really do still have difficulty going in and asking their teachers for help. And there's about 100 different reasons for that, and my kids included. It can be difficult. So this is a big part as parents where I feel like it's so important to step in. I would rather than discussing the grade situation and all that with them, I would rather you spend your time teaching them how to communicate, how to plan and discuss things with their teacher. What does it mentally take? If they're intimidated, coach them through dealing with intimidating people. That's a life skill, right? So when we talk about executive functioning, I'm talking about life skills. This isn't just stuff to get them through freshman year. So we want to make sure that they know how to ask for help. Role playing is fantastic. It's a great way to do it. What kind of help do they need? So finally we can coach them through, we get them in the door, then what? Lots of times they don't know. Mom, I went in for help, it didn't help. Well, what happened? Well, I stood there and he was helping another kid and then the bell rang. Great, so we put all that work into getting you in the door and now you didn't know what to do. So I have kids write out Post-it notes, I have them plan and prepare, they write out their list of questions, they practice it with me. So they need to really, and then they need to know, where do they need the help? They can't just go in and say, I don't get this problem. That it might help a little, but it's not gonna get to the root of it. So teach them how to ask those questions and do a lot of planning and preparing for that. I also encourage them to do that early. I know North has a couple of fantastic options that they were just discussing for students to prepare for exams. That early date I love because it's not too early to start thinking about it. We don't want to stress them out and get them freaked out about exams early, but we want them starting to think about this end of semester. The planning part is big. Obviously, it's a significant portion of executive functioning and what we do, but for me, just having a visual plan for these kids is what I have found in all of the students I've worked with has been the most effective. When they see it, when they write it out, it becomes real and it becomes manageable, which is the best part. So this really helps them to kind of understand that I know what I need, understand what they need to do, and it gives them a structure and makes it more specific, so it's a little bit less overwhelming. I have a couple pictures up here. These are just general tools I use. Just big picture wise, having a framework on their week. If they feel like they have too much time or too little time, that's going to impact their efforts and their mindset around it. So helping them to visually see their time, what a typical week looks like, setting aside time to plan and prepare and to analyze grades, that's all going to be very, very important. And the second piece is I always like to throw up a planner layout. So I recommend using a student planner that's a little bit more detailed than the traditional calendar that the schools give out, which are wonderful. That's a great place to jot down the homework and to keep track of all the dates and such. But when we're talking about actually understanding what we're going to do to meet the expectation and how we're going to plan ahead and how we're going to break things down and work backwards, I like them to kind of do it in the Monday through Friday kind of morning to night approach. So we put our classes in order, we put due dates up in yellow on the day they're due, and then we teach them to look at what it's going to take to actually do well on those. And then we're very, very specific in, if there's a test on Friday, I don't just want them writing study, test Friday, test Friday, test Friday, because that's what they do. And they look at their notebook and go, test Friday. But I'll just study for that later. And it doesn't really do them a whole lot of good. So we want it to be very specific. And then when they have that plan laid out, they're starting to see that in an evening's work, it's not just going to be the homework you had assigned that's due the next day. It's also going to be the stuff that you need to be thinking about kind of looking ahead at what's coming up for the end of the week. So those are some really important components in planning, in addition to having their outside activities, the fun stuff too, because I want them to be able to work towards those rewards and see what they have coming up that's exciting at the end of the week. But they need to consider what they've got going, especially if their schedule's busy. Because if they've got 3 tests on Friday and a whole bunch of stuff going Thursday night, what's going to happen Thursday? They're not going to have time to prepare for that and do their homework. They're going to need to learn to plan backwards and be more prepared. So I like to just kind of share that because this is a time of year where sometimes the workload starts to pick up towards the end of the semester, and they need some good ways for managing that. All right, so this is a big one. As I talked about when I first started, the self-regulation piece is so critical because we can come up with all these wonderful tools. Some of our kids will push back on some of those structures, and some of them will embrace them. I've seen it go both ways. At the end of the day, we can do the teaching and the training and the guiding, and we can sit with them and work through it. However, that doesn't mean that they're going to be motivated to use it, or look at it, or do it, or be able to stay focused and not get distracted and keep their phone down and their tabs closed on the YouTube and put down the Fortnite, whatever it is that's going on in our house these days, right? So it's difficult. I really want them to start to think about what it is they want to accomplish. Because if we can connect it to their ultimate goal, not our goal, not the grades, what do you want at the end of the semester? Well, I want to get good grades. Great, how are you going to make that happen? You know, let's start to break it down and let's put it in their own terminology. They might not say good grades. They might just say, I just want to do well and get you off my back. Great, let's put it into those words. That's my number one piece of feedback I get from students, that when they come in our office, they just want their parents off their back. So perfect, let's figure out how we're going to do that. And we work it backwards. So we need to be able, in order to have that happen, whether it's getting good grades, getting your parents off your back, you have to be able to self-regulate. You have to be able to follow through on all of these things that you've learned at school. Use the resources, listen to your teachers and your parents, use the tools and things you've been taught, and stay focused and get the work done. That's very difficult at times for kids to do, especially in the digital age that we live in with the social media and the technology and the distractions. But we want, at the end of the day, for them to actually prioritize and practice strategies specifically for getting motivated and for managing themselves. And to do that, it kind of starts with a conversation about really figuring out what does get in their way. So I call it Call Yourself Out. This is one of the tools from just one of my workbooks. But asking them, and or you guys probably already know, and they probably already know, writing out what typically gets in your way. You know, is it, and then why? They might say, oh, it's the Fortnite, I can't stay, oh, it's the phone, I can't stay awake. Great, why? Are you avoiding doing the work? Do you just not have self-regulation? Do you just need some strategy? Do you need me to take it? Do you need accountability? Do I need to take I literally put the Xbox in the trunk for a little while. It's very sad what happened in the household after that. Made me really rethink how long I was going to keep it in the trunk. But it's really important that they start to identify what is it. Is it overwhelm? Why are you on your phone? Are you just avoiding it because you're overwhelmed? Well, we need to deal with the overwhelm then, right? It's not necessarily that they're just so obsessed with the phone. They might be avoiding it. They might have difficulty focusing. They might have anxiety about something. So it's important to figure out what's getting in the way. And then in turn, once we've identified the key factors that are getting in the way, what are we going to do about it, right? So we're bringing it right back to not just talking about what the problem is, what is our solution? So I have a tool that I just call them if-then plans. You can do these things on scraps of paper, right? Just figure out if it's happening, let's start to brainstorm what can I do in the moment. And that's the stuff we want you as parents cueing and prompting them on. So I would rather you cue and prompt them on this than on checking their grade. I mean, check the grades, yes, but then checking each grade and discussing every single test and homework score. This stuff is far more important because it's going to lead to them being more productive and successful. So on the if-thens, I like to talk about 2 factors. One, brainstorm ideas of what they're actually going to do. Google it if you don't have good ideas, if they don't like, if you have them, they don't like yours, which is probably more likely. You probably have all the answers. They just don't want to hear them. They can Google it. I don't care, but let's do some problem solving. And then things they need to remind themselves. For a lot of students, I find that that self-talk and that constant reminder is really even more valuable. And then teaching them to catch themselves in the moment. So they need to first stop and recognize it's happening. That's very powerful. If we can just say, like, look, honey, I'm observing that you're on your phone again. Stop, time out. What's going on? Oh, I'm on my phone. What's coming into play? You know, you can work them through that and then point them in the direction of using the strategies and reminding themselves of those things they want to remember. Most kids will write down, remember, Mom and Dad are gonna get really mad if I get a D on this, better study. That's what they want to tell them. Great, I don't care what you tell yourself. It has to be meaningful for you as a student. So I feel like that self-regulation piece I can't stress enough. I'm gonna talk in my last couple minutes a little bit about just the actual planning process with regard to exams. So all of this is kind of relevant leading up to end of semester, but the exams specifically speaking, there's a few components that I like to discuss. The actual planning process, I showed you kind of a big picture planner earlier. I have a structure that we use for kind of just that last, let's say like 10-day period-ish, just specifically that week of exams. I want them kind of looking at the big picture and looking ahead. So the exam schedule that we put up, I'll show you how I like to have them work backwards. This needs to happen early. This shouldn't be something they're doing like the Tuesday before when finals start on Wednesday. We want this happening 10 days, 2 weeks early. I have a lot of kids now who we're starting to set up the framework for this with. They should consider everything else that we've done, the analysis, the grade analysis, all of the tools, their if-thens, pull out all of those great things that you guys have worked through. This helps them though to stop all of that swirling and overwhelm that goes on with finals, or it helps them also to see that finals, for studying for exams, there is a lot they actually can do. Because a lot of kids are just like, oh, I'm just going to sit in the library with my friends and read over my notes. Great, you can do that. However, is that really the most efficient and effective way to do well on your finals? They're going to be able to then assess what's available to them, and that's a really important part of this, is really understanding the differences between each of their classes, because the exams, the grades and the actual assessments are going to look different. For English, it might be that they are writing an essay or a paper, an in-class essay. Sometimes they're given the prompts in advance. They're going to prepare for that very differently than they are for their biology exam or for their math test. So I have a worksheet, and basically it's just kind of getting them to think through for every single class. Did the teacher give you a review guide? Have they told you there's a review guide coming? Or do you have to figure it out for yourself just using the class materials? Are there chapter objectives? Were there, and this is one that kids still laugh. I'm like, so you have chapter objectives? No, wait, hang on, here's this packet my teacher gave us. I'm like, yeah, well, there they are. There's listed the 10 things you need to know for this unit. Every single unit it was given to you. Awesome. They didn't know it was there because they didn't look. They just turned the page and started doing the packet, right? So are there chapter objectives or things or terms you need to know somewhere that were handed out throughout the semester? Let's take everything out and get it organized. Would it be helpful to make my own study guide in this class? And I'll talk about that in a minute, keeping an eye on the clock. What's the format of the test? Is it an essay? Is it short answer? Is it multiple choice? Is it problems? Is it new problems? And then what are the best ways going to be to study? And then that's going to be the most important part, because most students, again, even juniors and seniors, and a lot of college kids who come into my office for the first time, still the only ways they think of when they hear the term studying to study are blank flashcards, do a Quizlet. Quizlet's a great tool for the right type of material, or review their notes. So fine, that's helpful. Not generally enough to really truly learn, understand, synthesize, and then be able to apply the information. So I want them kind of thinking through all of that and what it's going to take to kind of organize, sort their material into piles, highlight the key information, and really assess what the teacher's giving you. I encourage them to talk to their teachers about that. So all those questions I just kind of rattled off, the teacher can answer those best. So now is a really good time to start asking those questions and encouraging your students to do so. You know I like crazy charts. So this is a student example. I was going to bring my giant paper. I love giant paper. So we use giant sheets of paper for a lot of planning in my office, essays, research assignments, final exam planning. This has been, and it's crazy because it's not one that's typed up in any book that I've written, but it's been my most popular one. I have kids who come back year after year who don't work with us anymore. They're like, can I just come in for like one session to do that big exam sheet? Great, yes you can. And I still haven't typed it up because they like to make it themselves. So this is what we do with it, okay? So blank sheet of paper, we start backwards, so we kind of go down to the right-hand side, and we work backwards from the days of their exams, and we have them put which exams are on which days, and then we talk about, okay, usually there's school on Monday and Tuesday, so we block that out, and then we look at the weekend. Sometimes we'll go a little further back. And so that's kind of what we set up, because I want them kind of looking at what's coming, because clearly, if you have gym and bio exams on Friday, those are probably the ones you're really going to emphasize on Thursday night, but that doesn't mean you're not going to start working on them in the days prior. And this just helps them to kind of see that left to right flow. On the left-hand side, after they've kind of gone through the previous slide where we're talking about what is it really going to take, what's available in this class, we talk about then what works to study in this class for you, what's everything you're going to need to do. If there's a review packet, you need to put down, do the review packet. If you want to make your own study guide, put down study guide. If flashcards would help, write down flashcards. So we almost just make a checklist class by class of everything that they need to get done. I know it looks crazy at the end of the day when it's all filled in, as does the student planner. It's so helpful to them. None of the students who come in, even those who get overwhelmed by a lot of information, none of them have a problem looking at it this way because at the end, when it's all kind of said and done, they feel such relief that they know what to do, they know when to do it, it's very specific, and they have control. They can cross something off and move it over to the next day if it didn't get done, unless the exam was that day. So, really important, this is kind of just that working backwards, scratch paper works, poster board, I don't care what they use. And then they take each of these items here and they kind of just start to plug it in. They can cross it off when they're done. I don't care what kind of system they're using for Xing off or what crossing out. I just tell them, don't like scribble it all in. You kind of want to look back and see what it said just to feel rewarded about it, and then also not be able to forget what it is that you did. Just one other example, kind of that whole working backwards, just another student example that I put up there. And my last point that I will make is that kind of studying itself. What does studying look like? I've kind of alluded to that a little bit. The most important things are, yes, flashcards and reading over notes have their place. It can be helpful. I don't want all the time going there because generally it's not the best way to do it. There are so many other ways to study. I encourage kids to talk with the teachers, talk with other students, talk with you, Google search, figure it out. But I'm going to share a couple of my favorites with you before I'm done. I want them actually doing something with the information. Work with it, write it out, make a chart, organize it in a better way, color code it with highlighters, print a diagram from online and add your own notes and definitions to it. I want you working with it because that's going to help you to better process and make connections. And that for me is probably the #1 way that I have students study for exams. I can tell them how to do that for any content. Most of them are like, well, that wouldn't really work for math and it wouldn't really work for Spanish. It does. There's a way to do it. These are just some examples that we have, like students printing out images and then adding their own connections of like before and after so that they could really understand what was happening. Or like printing out a chart they found online and just recognizing, oh, well, when I see it this way and everything's color-coded, that makes me kind of really understand these prefixes and these endings and conjugations better. Awesome. Or maybe it's a history class where and I like Google. Google's a great resource for this stuff. And they might Google it and find something where the content's actually different. But what's nice is it gives them an idea then. And they can say like, well, that's not really what we studied, but I'm going to make a chart just like that given the information that my teacher gave me. So we want them using a lot of visuals and doing a lot of working with the information. I put a couple of math examples up here. That's a big one for like math or a chemistry class when they get to that point. You know, a lot of these if-thens and how-to instructions, if we kind of teach them to be able to understand, okay, if the problem says this, I do these 3 steps. If the problem says that, I do those 3 steps. I want them studying the process, not just memorizing formulas, because that does you no good if you don't know how and when to use the formula. So it's kind of an example of them translating and saying, oh, if it's these instructions, here's what I do. And they can write it directly on the review packet. So when they go in for help from their teacher, that's what I'd like them to ask for. Hey, can you help me write out instructions? Can you help me know the steps to how to do these problems or when I use this formula? That's the kind of stuff that helps them to really get more out of asking for help. So that's all that I had for you. That's kind of my step-by-step general approach. I do have a course available, as Ms. Schwartz mentioned, and it is a Final Exam Finish Strong course, and it literally is a video recording and then a screen recording of me walking the kids through all of these tools and creating them and telling them what to think about. So it kind of just walks them through step by step, and then all of the downloads are available for a bunch of those tools and templates I showed you, and there's even more. And then there will be a worksheet that goes through each step, so I almost want them kind of questioning and thinking through and checking off, do I have all the materials as they go through that process. So just so you know that that's available. I do also want to mention I have a bunch of free resources and free video tutorials as well. So if you go to my business Facebook page or website, there are a lot of just video tips and tutorials so that if you wanted to see this or use this information, you can get a lot of that for free also. So if you have any questions, I'm going to stick around at the end because I know we have more content to cover, so I will be around if anybody has anything for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. At some point, I felt a little called out because I'm in the middle of a graduate class and I caught a case of the overwhelms. So my final project due in a week or 2, so I need to get working on that. Maybe I need a chart. So I would like to welcome our panel members up here. So we're going to close tonight with a discussion, a panel discussion with some of our staff members here on what we do to support students when they have anxiety. So exams bring stress. And I like that I get to follow Lisa because I think in my own academic life and also when I've worked with students, that planning and that plan going into something stressful really does help. But it doesn't mean you don't need a little extra support and coaching. That's what we're here for. That's one of our goals, and I know Janice and I both said it out loud at various parent meetings, but this is the time for them to learn how to do those things. This is the time for them to learn how to work through that stress, because when they're in college, they need to have a bag of tricks that work for them. So this is the safest space, and I'm still learning my bag of tricks. I'm paid a little too much tuition to feel that way, I think. But we know exams bring stress. And just always remember that your student does have an alpha team. If you get a copy of this PowerPoint, that'll take you to the link of the list of who those contact people are. And if they're not already seeing someone who's a member of CSSS, the counselor's a good place to start, especially around exam time when some of that stress may be academic stress as well. And so it's a good place to start. So just remember that that resource always exists for your student. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to a member of CSSS and we'll help them get hooked up with somebody who's going to help them. So I'm going to introduce the members of our panel. I made them give me a little blurb about them to read, and I practiced in my best voice today, but I told them I wouldn't embarrass them. So, at the end is Cindy Carmick. She's a counselor here at DGN. She has 3 daughters. Her oldest is a junior at South. She's a 6th grader and a 3rd grader as well. And she's lived in Downers Grove for the past 14 years. In the middle is Miss Erin Blattner. She's a math teacher here at DGN. She teaches a number of math courses, but I've worked with her specifically supporting students in AP Calc. And she and I, that's actually how I met her, because of her support to students in AP Calc. And then at the end here we have Kelly Zerner, who you spoke to earlier. She's the associate principal for staff and students. She's a DGN resident and also a parent of a current DGN junior and a freshman, and she is a 7th grader. So they're up here. I'm going to ask them a few questions. So we'll start with the questions. They may dialogue amongst themselves and add on to each other, then we'll open up to comments and questions at the end. Okay, so I will start with Cindy. So Cindy has done a number of professional development activities, which is one of the reasons I've asked her to speak tonight. And I was wondering, what elements of the student experience do you think contribute to anxiety and the need to seek out supports at DGN?
Okay, when I think about can you guys all hear me okay? Okay. When I think about a student's experience, I just don't think about it in school. So I also think about what happens outside of school, because many times students have issues that happen at home and that can bleed over into school, that can cause stress. And then if that builds up over time, it can also cause anxiety. And so I don't know if I made enough of them, but I gave you some examples of things that students come to see us for. So I categorize them in ways that they're not in specific order, but we see them for a lot of different things. And so sometimes it could be just a one-stop shop, just something happened during the day, needed to problem solve, made sure everything that was, make sure that everything's okay and that they can work through it. And sometimes there are students who need to seek us out more than that. And so we'll see students and they might seek us out for academic support. We could have very high achieving students who in 24 hours, sometimes they can't get it all done with everything they do. And there are things that need to give, and many times it's the student's health, sleep, eating that gives. And so we work on ways where we can eliminate some of that stress and give them ways to problem solve to help make the situation better and move forward. We have students who are in the underperforming category, and when you don't see success a lot during the day, that can cause a lot of angst. It can cause a lot of sadness. They want to do as best as they can, and they just can't seem to figure out how to fight their way out of a paper bag in order to do that. So those could be some examples of what a student would come to see us for. There's that social aspect. I can't think of probably a teenager who doesn't have their phone as like an extra appendage to their body, but their social life is important to them. And so things that happen in person something can take place in a class. There's a lot that takes place on the internet and through Snapchat and those kinds of things. So things that you might not physically see that could be on that phone, they can trickle into our office as well. Things that happen at home, there could be financial worries, there could be a divorce situation, a blended family. So things that go on in home, those can also blend over and trickle over into school. There are a number of students who think about world events. I think we just had our ALICE training, you know, our school safety training a couple weeks ago. There are students who think, oh my gosh, if something were to happen, what would I do? And they can perseverate on that. And so we'll have conversations about that as well. There could be traumatic events, there are significant life changes for them, so there could be a number of things with their experience inside of school and their experience outside of school that go on. You know, but I think, you know, the biggest thing is that the counselor is the first line of defense that they can come and see and that you can also contact. And then if more, you know, support is needed, we can actually direct you in that direction as well.
Okay, thank you. Go to Kelly, who has a similar question. What elements are you seeing in your office that about the student experience that contribute to anxiety and stress? So Kelly works with CSSS. She's my co-leader of that department, but works specifically with the deans.
All right, so prior to my role currently, I was a dean for 9 years before that, a classroom teacher, so I've kind of gone full circle and truly have never left high school is what I usually say. And I think to just kind of piggyback on Cindy, and Lisa mentioned it as well, one of the things that the deans typically face, and in the form of anxiety and stress, kind of manifests in many different ways. And sometimes it is a school refusal. It's overwhelming. They're feeling overwhelmed, so they choose not to face that obstacle and they want to stay home. You know, so we can see some attendance issues and truancy. Sometimes the deans will be faced with what I call social presence. So fast forward, when we were in school, most of us, you know, we really didn't have this social media piece to our lives. Social norms and social anxiety and social pressures were all very present, but they weren't immediate, which is what our kids are facing. Because of their phones, and again, all the wonderful things that our internet and phones provide us, we also have to look at the other side of that and what it's giving our kids as far as having a stage and feeling that they have to be on stage all the time. So sometimes that comes out in the dean's office with verbal altercations. You know, they're having problems. There's what they call drama happening amongst their peer group. People are getting called out on social media, the negative pieces of this, where, you know, it's always stronger, it's easier to make a comment when you're in the safety of your home or over the phone, but not have to face someone. So I think we're kind of growing in that realm of catching up to our kids who have a different level of pressure because it's immediate and it's for the world to see. And some of that anxiety, I think that probably Cindy can really attest to, is the fact that our kids are growing up in a world where they think the other, whatever that other is, their other friends, their things that they see on the internet, have it so much better than them, right? Because if we're gonna have a social media post, we're not posting what we look like when we roll out of bed in the morning, right? We photoshopped it, we cleaned it up, we look like we're always having a great time. And sometimes that really weighs in on a student's psyche, whether they admit it or not. It's weighing in as, I think everybody else is having a good time and I'm struggling and maybe it's just me. And they start to self-doubt, and that's where you see some level of anxiety and stress come in, really where the counselors really step into that realm and help them through that. And that's one thing that we see often in all of, you know, really in the alpha teams and our teachers as well. I mean, Erin's gonna speak to a lot of this as well. They see it in the classroom. They see a student who is starting to struggle and you see them kind of grab the phone and they're looking and it's, ooh, and then all of a sudden their face changes and they're distracted. So these are all things that we're working towards, and I'm not here to, you know, I always promised myself when I started being, you know, when I started down the road of education, I didn't want to say, oh, as I grow up and I grow older and I say, oh, the younger generation, it's wonderful, all the things that they have, but there's things that we need to support them. And we're kind of playing catch up to their world, really, to their world.
Sure. And just to piggyback on that, and especially having a daughter who's a junior, 24/7, they have access to information, whether it's social, whether it's news. I mean, a lot of us had to wait for the morning and the evening news, right? They have it 24/7. They never get a shut off, and so You know, if I think back to grade school, high school, middle school, if something happened at school, especially socially, I could get off the bus, I could go home, and I had refuge. I had a break. They don't have a break. And many times I think it's very easy to say, oh, put the phone away or turn it off or delete or, you know, block, whatever it might be. It's much harder to get them to do that. And so I think it's really important that sometimes those gears in their mind just go and go and go. It's like it never shuts off. And that's a lot of times where you'll see those kids come into our office because they don't know how to shut it off and then they don't know how to problem solve. And so that's what we see. So 24/7, that's always like a concern of mine, just as a parent, if I'm being honest. It's just, it's there all the time. And how do you help them self-regulate that world? So.
Thank you. Right, for Erin, you know, what are some of the different strategies that you've used in the classroom to create an environment where students may be struggling with anxiety can be successful, and how are you seeing anxiety in the classroom?
As far as strategies are concerned, I actually, everything that Lisa was telling us about were things that I use. I am definitely a teacher who likes to give my students a calendar of what the next unit looks like so they know when to expect their quiz, when to expect a test, just so that they can plan ahead. I tried a couple of times to go through a chapter without doing that, like, oh, we can just play it by ear, and I watched the student anxiety go up, and I'm like, nope, we're gonna go back to a calendar, we're gonna go back to planning this. Other strategies, I definitely make things available online, which I believe most of the teachers here at North do. Personally, I use Google Classroom, but I know like Google Sites and some other things are other places where students can get access to notes, videos, answer keys, all kinds of things. So a lot of the stuff that Lisa said to look at, one of the big things that she said was learning objectives. I give those out every chapter. A student loses them, they're right there in Google Classroom, like really easy for them to find that access. So just simple things, but more along the lines of organization and making sure that they know what's coming definitely helps with the stress and the anxiety. I'm sorry, but I have to repeat the second part of your question.
I just said, how do you see anxiety manifest in the classrooms? Because it'll be different than what walks into the offices. What do you see? What are your indicators?
So what's hard for me is at the beginning of the year, I don't know students' personalities, so I can't tell when things are different. But this time of year, I definitely can. So one of the biggest things I've noticed recently is students will stop turning in homework. And sometimes the parent will contact me because they'll see on TAC, hey, they turned in no homework and it's all zeros. Definitely reach out to me. Let's have a conversation of, is this what your child normally does? Or is this something different that you're seeing as well? I will contact your parent, especially this time of year, because I'll know, okay, this kid's been doing homework straight for 2 months and now all of a sudden we stop. But if this is, like you see a pattern that's different because you're looking at home access and you can see, oh wait, that drop in that grade, or, you know, just something really out there, contact the teacher and say, hey, was this a fluke, or do you think something's going on? And I can tell you as a teacher, I've noticed your kid putting their head down. I've noticed your kid obsessed with their phone, even though I tell them you can't have your phone out in class, I can hear it buzzing in their pocket. Like, you reach out to me, I'm gonna tell you exactly what I'm seeing or what I'm not seeing, or I'm gonna respond to you. I want your student to be comfortable in my classroom. I want them to learn what I have to share with them, but my #1 priority, and again, I think that this is true for most teachers, is for your student to be a happy, healthy individual. And if there's something going on that we should know about, then please let us know. A lot of it goes straight to the counselor, which is great, but sometimes it could just be, especially in my subject area, which every student loves, math. Sometimes it could just be math. And going back again to what Lisa said, that coming in and not knowing how to ask for help is really, really hard. And so the stuff that she outlined of a student saying specifically, all right, I need help with what these directions mean, or what is the step I have to take, I'd love to help you out. Ask me those specific questions and I will sit down and we'll go through it. And again, I feel that most of our teachers here are willing to do that, but it's a team effort. As Kelly said, it's all of us working together. It takes a village to raise a child. It's true. And I know that sometimes, and again, it could be me, maybe you guys have heard bad things about me, I don't know. But sometimes a teacher might come across as, oh, they're so mean, or they don't listen, or they don't respond. But oftentimes, as a parent, all you gotta do is send me an email and let me know what's going on, and we can work through it together. we're on your side. We want your kids to be successful, and we want to do anything we can to support them. And I think that goes for the counselors, that goes for the deans, that goes for all of us.
Okay, I will open up for questions, but I want to kind of piggyback on what Erin said. I'm new to the building, and one of the things that I had a little anxiety about was how much it's bigger here, and I don't know any of the staff, right? Because I'm coming from a place where I was and I didn't know anybody. I've been so impressed with the teachers' willingness to reach out to the support, T-SSS, and ask, is there something going on? And reaching out to parents and asking. And I appreciate that because I was a teacher for a number of years, and I remembered what it was like to be in a room and notice something was different with a kid, and then not really be able to pinpoint why. So I've been really impressed just in general with how, as a staff here, we communicate, and then the parents who've reached out as well. So I want to thank you guys for that too. So if there are any, do you have any questions for the panel? We got about 10 minutes till 8:30 if you have any questions.
Can I ask a specific question about the math?
Sure.
I have a pet nickname for the math here. We came from out of district, and I call it in fun, the cockamamie math system.
Awesome.
What is there specific to, because my students having problems adjusting from the traditional math. The school didn't even, they paid lip service to the Common Core. So this is a huge change. He's having problems with that transition.
Can you repeat the question since we don't hear it?
It was more a statement, but I think I know what we're going with. The question is more along the lines of we're making the transition from traditional, or what we've seen over the last maybe 10, 20 years, to Common Core, and how is that different, and how can we make that adjustment? Basically, the mathematics, the actual skills that we teach are exactly the same. The difference is we are applying it to all real world. Why are we taking all this time to learn math if we're not showing what's the connection to everyday life? And so the biggest transition, at least at the high school level, that I see is that we do a lot more word problems, and not your traditional Sally, bought 10 houses or 10 hats and blah, blah, blah. It's much more involved. It's problems that take multiple steps. It's problems that have to put together a lot of concepts, and that is definitely something new. Here's the advantage. That's what they're expected to do once they get to the ACT, SAT. Those tests have made all these changes, and we're working to get them ready for that. But we're also working to get them ready for the real world and what they're going to see when they get out there. Cindy and I just went to a conference on helping students with stress and anxiety, and one of the things that I picked up was asking students about how they use math every weekend. And so that's been my thing for 3 weeks now. We come back, I'm like, so how did you use math this weekend? And what's crazy is the kids cannot get over how much quadratics, those of you who have students in math too, how much quadratics appears in everyday life. And then we go back and we connect it to, okay, so when we saw this formula that in traditional math would have been a formula by itself, now we can look at what we see in everyday life, and we can apply what would be the value of knowing the formula or the equation that went with that real world situation.
And just to kind of reiterate kind of how you're feeling. So I had my oldest, quite honestly, came over to North and struggled a little bit when he was an 8th grader learning this new concept in math. And I didn't know what to do. I really didn't. I mean, it was so unlike what I had learned and something that I understood. And of course, I trust the process, and I know the teachers, and Ms. Blender was his teacher. And so I had firsthand knowledge and experience. And I really just had to take a moment to let him struggle first to learn it. And once he did, his level of thinking and thought-provoking and applying things, because it's not just, here's the formula, here's the equation. He takes those concepts and he applies them into situations. And as I hear him outwardly speaking to his problem-solving skills, he's far surpassed whatever I could ever do. So it's just amazing. And it's freshman year, you're going to see that little struggle as they shift over. Be patient. Keep communicating with the teacher, because they are here to support you. And as an educator and as a parent, I went through that same, okay, hold on, let me pause, let me step back, and let him grow. And it really will pay off in the end. You'll see it in his SATs and ACT scores, truly.
Okay, thank you. Was there another question?
Let me just add to that real fast. Just because I want you guys to experience her as the parent, she contacted me first and she's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing to my kid? But here's the thing, she contacted me and she said, you know, what can I do? I want, like, he's never struggled, what's going on? And I said, wait a second, tell him to come in for help, make sure he's got specific questions. And we worked together to make sure that her son was doing what he needed to do to be successful at the level he wanted to be successful. And again, I cannot emphasize to you enough, if you've got questions, concerns about any course, not just math, reach out to your teacher and say, hey, look, this is what I'm seeing at home. Do you see the same thing? What can I do to help?
What recommendations do you have to a child when they're actually sitting down writing an exam and they become very anxious? What, besides breathing, taking a deep breath, any other ideas?
I'll reiterate the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the question was, in the moment of the exam, when a student starts to feel overwhelmed or anxious, what recommendations do they have for working through that at that time?
And I know you mentioned, you know, as far as breathing, yes, they can always try that. I think if that doesn't work, you know, even if they try some kind of mindfulness where it's like if they just close their eyes and if they just, you know, kind of go to a happy place, you know, and just kind of reset their frame of mind, that can also be a good technique. I think if it becomes a point where all of a sudden they just cannot look at the things on the page, then they need to share that with their teacher. And so, and it might be that I've had some students where they just get overwhelmed. They need to go get a drink of water. They need to walk. That's all they need to do. And then they can come back and they can, you know, regain their composure and they can go ahead and they can be successful. Sometimes it gets to a point where they need to come down and they need to process with a counselor. And so those would be at least my quick suggestions as far as that piece. You know, and they can even do some visualizing before or give some thought as to before they go to the exam, okay, this is how I would like this experience to go, and kind of play that in their mind so that hopefully once they get in there, they can say, okay, this is how I pictured it. Let me, you know, go through these steps, and hopefully they'll have some success.
Another couple techniques that, depending upon your student, I think one of the keys here is have that conversation now. Talk about now, if I come across this exam and I start to get overwhelmed, maybe it's your student prefers going to the easy questions first. Get them out of the way. Go get the easy ones, take care of them. It might be, I'm gonna guess on the hard ones, then I'm gonna go to the easy ones, and when time allows, I'll come back, because at least their first hunch will kind of point them in the right direction. So really, I think one of the biggest preparations for that is having a plan in mind. If I get overwhelmed, what will I do? And kind of having those step process. I can go talk to the teacher. I can ask for that water break. I can go see my counselor. I think once they kind of think through the solution, like as Lisa had mentioned, here's the problem, now what's the solution? If they're thinking through their solution, it's less scary in the moment because they feel like they have some empowerment over it.
Okay, any other questions for them? Okay, well, we will be around if you have any individual questions. We want to thank you guys for coming tonight and for everything that you do for your kids.